with 3 ohms again, so that we gather everyone's attention. Let's take a deep breath in. So coming now back to the Yoga Sutras, you heard the context, and so now you know the Yoga Sutras is the root document of yoga, and essentially it picks up on the practices of 33 religions and is the integration of all the good aspects, the core of Bhakti Yoga, Tantra Yoga and Hatha Yoga. And each by themselves have their own problems, but once it is understood in an integrated way through the Yoga Sutras that Patanjali wrote, all of that is removed. However, in reality, when people practice or think of yoga, they refer to so many other documents of yoga, right? You hear of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika of Swatmarama, and then of course you have so many other documents of yoga related to the breath, the Swara Yoga documents. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika largely deals with asana and pranayama and the Hatha Yoga discipline. And then in the case of the Vasishtha Samhita, it speaks a lot more about the nadis. The Shiva Samhita talks about the nadis and all of these things. So all of these are the additional elements of yoga. They get into the depth of various topics, a lot of details in there. But remember, the real Yoga Sutra and the real understanding of yoga are yogic principles. Once you understand the principles, you can work yoga in your own way. It is not like one yoga is correct and another is wrong. Okay? You can work with whatever practice are suitable for you to carry your journey for spiritual realization. Right? So now, let's understand the root text of yoga, the Yoga Sutras, how it is divided and what message it is giving us.
Can you before that came in late, a little background on Patanjali, if you've done it before. Just quick now.
Okay. Question asked was, can I give a little background on Patanjali? I gave a context on the Yoga Sutras and all of those others, but about Patanjali I know nothing. And the thing is basically, essentially in the story that goes, Patanjali is considered the he's considered the Adishesha, and so when Patanjali is always represented in any kind of form, he is represented in the form of a snake. Okay, the Adishesha. Okay, no, the concept of Adishesha. No, the concept of Adishesha is if you go upstairs to the Anantapadmanabha shrine, Mahavishnu shrine over here, you will find Mahavishnu is lying on a bed of snake. Okay, the concept of Adi means the beginning. Adi Shesha means what is left in the beginning. In other words, there is God and there is whatever else that is not God. So that is referred to as Adi Shesha. So Patanjali is in various referred that way. But who Patanjali, what it is, we don't know. when we go into, when I gave the other context, essentially I wanted to go into a more what I call a historical and spiritual context is what I wanted to refer all of that to. And with respect to the person as Patanjali, I don't have much knowledge. There is also one view that Patanjali was not only the author of the Yoga Sutras, but the Charaka Samhita, that Charaka was also Patanjali. Okay? And so they have these views. Who knows what it is, but really doesn't matter the content. Okay? So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali has 196 sutras in it. And unlike, you see, reading of the Brahma Sutras, the Vedanta document, is very different from reading of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra document. Okay? Reading of the Brahma Sutra document is such that unless you're able to refer back to the Vedas, the Upanishads particularly, you will not understand very much of the Brahma Sutras. Whereas that is not the case with respect to the Yoga Sutras. But you need to have some degree of contextual understanding, particularly regarding words and things like that. Okay? And in the first chapter, of course, it's an introductory overview, so you can read it like an executive summary, and so it is complete in itself. Okay? Whereas in later chapters, when it gets into certain areas, at least two areas I can tell you, is the concept of chakras and the other concept of these nadis, right? These concept of chakras and nadis, Patanjali seems to know, but he doesn't go into it. And so clearly, if you want to understand more about it, you have to go to another text. So that is the implication. And again, from the perspective of the spiritual philosophy, nadis and chakras are not so important. Okay? So the thing is, you see, that is the reason he doesn't get into this. But otherwise, unlike the Brahma Sutras, the Yoga Sutra is a self-contained document. You don't need to go and refer to something else in order to understand it. Okay? So the Yoga Sutra is laid out with 4 chapters. The first chapter with 51 sutras is called the Samadhipada. The second chapter is called Sadhana Pada, in other words, the method of practice. And the third chapter with 56 sutras is the Vibhuti-pada. It is all the experiences that come from yoga. And the fourth chapter is called Kaivalya-pada with 34 sutras. Now, when it is laid out like this, the way in which we have to understand is, the first chapter is the introductory overview. The second chapter and the third chapter together is the detailed explanation of the analysis, method, experiences, solution, all of that. But the first and the second and third chapter are really focused on one individual seeking yogic realization of who am I. Whereas the fourth chapter is a summary overview, and it gives the context of who is that one person relative to all of existence. You see, too often people talk of self-realization, right? But there is the understanding that self-realization, people also call it as God realization. And you can put another word to it, existence realization, right? Or reality realization, okay? So all of it is the same. So that fourth chapter is important. Who are you in the context of everything else? So that's what it gives you, okay? So now what we will do is, we will go a quick look at how the chapters flow. I'll put the The first chapter I've already said is an introductory overview, right? So I'll go over the introductory overview with you. The first chapter consists of 3 sections, 3 segments. You will not see any sections in there. Only when you understand the Yoga Sutra, you know how to divide it into sections, right? It is only the, how many? Those 51 sutras that are there in the first chapter, right? The first 20 sutras together are the first section. Then the next 6 to the next 9 sutras, you can put it as the second section. Okay? And then thereafter, the last 20 some whatever sutras that remain, they are the third section. Okay? So how does this fall out that way? As follows. The first 20 sutras is like a introductory summary. The next 9 sutras are a little bit more explanation about, to go into a little detail. Then after explaining actually what happens in the second section, he explains what is the concept of God, Ishvara. Then he goes on, again he puts it a different kind of an introductory summary in different words. Okay? So we'll go over that introductory summary right now. The Yoga Sutra begins Atha Yoga Anushasana. Okay? He says this is how yoga is explained. When he says this is how yoga is explained, clearly in those days, yoga is a known word. Okay? And the concept of yoga or yoga is the concept of all the 33 religions that were present at that time. And he goes on to say, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. What is yoga? It is the Nirodha, or what you would call as, all of those are reasonable words. Cessation, control, restraint, or you can even call it regulation. Okay? There is not a good way to describe it. Essentially, it's a Sanskrit word. The ni is the prefix for a word called nikrishta. Okay? And nikrishta means that which is subtle. Okay? Nikrishta rodha. Okay? So it is rodha is kind of what you would call as what? Opposition or something like that, right? So you can call it as subtle opposition. So there is
Rodha is actually the lack of something, right?
lack of, see,
Yes.
the thing is basically, it can be all of those things, but the idea of it is subtly lacking something or removing something or whatever what it may be, right? So it's a concept of subtly opposing the chitta, right? So but when we use the word regulation, restraint, cessation, all of these, none of those words are perfect, okay? But the concept is, let's understand what is the meaning of chitta. Huh? No. Actually, this is something that's very important to understand, otherwise we'll miss the whole context of this.
Definitions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many of you know the word, you have heard from so many people, somebody who is very peaceful, they will say the person has prasanna chit, right? So the chitta is literally, you can think of it as the being. But when you think of the chitta as the being, that does not tell you everything. Okay? The chitta is, but the best way to explain it is computer terminology. If you think of it as a computing system, what does the computing system contain? The computing system contains all the programming entity, the circuitry, everything is in there, right? So chitta is that. Okay?
The mental or mind.
No. Don't bring mind and mental into it. That is a subset of the chitta.
सब कुछ
हाँ, जिसमें सब कुछ भरा है उसी का चित्त
सब कुछ
भरा है. So the right English word for it is consciousness. Okay? And what do we say? Consciousness goes from one lifetime into another until all the consciousness goes away and only the soul element is left, which is the eternal truth. Right? So the right word for chitta is consciousness.
When we die, the chitta is coming with us.
When you die, your consciousness goes with you, yes.
And the chitta also. Chitta is conscious. Chitta goes with us, right?
Yeah. And now, but one thing we have to realize, that is only if you need to have a rebirth. If you don't need a rebirth, no chitta is left, all of it is evaporated.
Chitta is independent of the internal, the core.
Chitta and Atma are not the same.
Chitta is carrying on.
Okay? When you die, if you have to take a rebirth, then the Atma and Chitta go out together. If there is no more rebirth left, or the Chitta basically is fully diluted and disappears. There is nothing left, only the Atma. Okay? So so Chitta we should understand as consciousness is the right word, but it is that which contains everything. It is the what you would call as the entire computing system of the being.
So it is the reason for existence, isn't it? Like in the form, in the appearance.
Obviously. Okay. So the Patanjali basically says in the second sutra, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That is, yoga is the, what will you say? The subtle opposition, regulations, whatever, all these words that use this, of the chitta. So if the computing system is the chitta, let's understand chitta a little deeper. You see, her chitta and her chitta are different. That's why she looks different from her. But is that all? No, not all. Because the chitta is different, she thinks differently from her. Right? Each one of us, our chitta is different. However, the base matter of everyone is exactly the same. So, let's take this analogy a little further. You're all familiar with the what is that atomic table called?
Periodic table.
Periodic table. Exactly. You're all familiar with the periodic table. One electron, one proton and one neutron come together, it is hydrogen. When it is all pairs of two, then in which case it is oxygen, right? And similarly, the bundle of them, as it expands and it goes to a point, how much is gold aurum? 50 something? 30 something?
32.
32? So anyway, so when if that is correct, when 32 electrons, 32 protons and 32 neutrons come together, it becomes gold, that element, right? If that is what is the periodic table atom. So this way, what happens is, it is the same base particle, but depending upon how they come together, they look very different. Huh? Hydrogen and oxygen are gas, whereas gold is something physical that you see over there, right? Now, let's take the thing further. The property of hydrogen is such that if you only sit in a hydrogen chamber, you will die because you don't get any oxygen. Whereas if you sit only in an oxygen chamber, you'll still live and you'll be good for it. Right? So essentially think of it. How it is, each of these have a different property altogether. Now, but each of them have their own chitta. Chitta in the sense, chitta along with its computing system comes all the properties of the chitta, the attributes, right? So that is what it means, a programmed entity. Now, you have two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen, it becomes a molecule of water. Water has yet a different property, right? So everything you see in all of existence, the base particle is one and the same. But then you put depending upon how they combine together and what, each has its own chitta, right? So today we know, as all of you know, that when a person is depressed, there are certain biochemicals that are not produced in the person, right? And when the person is happy, certain things are produced.
Like oxytocin and dopamine and
All of these. And then the other thing we also know is that if a person does not produce certain biochemicals, they are unable to go to sleep. If they produce it, they go to sleep, right? So think of what has happened. Each of them, moment by moment, your chitta is activated in a way that makes you who you are. But this thing, even though the base particle of everything is same, that base particle being the same and yet chitta being different. In the 4th chapter, Patanjali makes a statement that Vastu Samye, Vastu is a matter. Vastu Samye means equal, same. Vastu Samye Chitta Bhedat, whereas the chitta is different. Vastu Samye Chitta Bhedat Tayo Vibhakti Panta. Tayo Vibhakti Panta. Vibhakti is expression. Panta, their paths are different. Okay? So he clearly makes a point. It is when the base particle is the same, each is different. So the concept of computing system, and that defines the nature, the attributes, properties of it, that is the nature of chitta. Okay? So in other words, if you overcome the chitta, in other words, you are not affected by the chitta, that is when you realize yoga. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Okay? So essentially, we took great pains to deal with one sutra of Patanjali right from the 1st chapter. But this, there are about 5 or 6 key concepts that of yoga that come through. So I will dwell on those 5 or 6 key concepts. And after we have dwelt with it, we summarize all of them, because the goal of this session is not to go sutra by sutra, right? So, Yoga's chitta vritti nirodha tells us what is the nature of chitta. And then after that, in the 1st chapter, Patanjali goes on to say, chitta vritti means activation, okay? So, activation of our computing system. So, Patanjali after that goes on to say that there are 5 types of activation of the chitta and chitta vrittis. So the 5 types of activation, 4 of them are all related to your memory, whereas whatever you retain from whatever places. And the 5th one is sleep. Sleep is an activation of the system, and today we know that in deep sleep, your immune system is strengthened. So the idea is, when you fall asleep, all of us have a little transmitter within us. It connects into the cosmic intelligence. So in sleep, very unconsciously, we become rishis. We connect into the cosmic intelligence. We get our daily dose of antivirus and program updates. Download it. And so when we wake up in the morning, we are fresh, we are rejuvenated, we have new ideas, new thinking. So that is the concept of That's how it does. And of course, that's what gives you the strength of the immune system and the health for the body. And of course, in current day and age, too many people are busy doing too many things, not realizing that the cosmos didn't prepare you for that. You have to sleep when you have to sleep, not to force yourself to wake up, right? Stay awake. And so by doing that, what happens? Most people lack sleep, and as a result of lack of sleep, what happens? It results in the immune system weakening and people slowly developing different disorders of the health. So, sleeping enough is extremely important.
And what's that enough, Ada?
Good question.
It depends upon your chitta.
Chitta is relative.
Exactly. So the thing is, you see,
I'm
So-
really keeping track of sleep every day.
Yeah.
By
See,
minutes.
each person needs a different level of sleep. And so there are people who get away with 3-4 hours of sleep per night. Okay? There are many people who need more sleep than that. And there are some people who need as much as 9 or 10 hours to be in good health.
Yeah.
They need that. Now, so each person, depending upon their chitta, needs according to how much, whatever they need. However, I also need to point out, since we deviated into this business of sleep, that how much of sleep. A lot of people train themselves to sleep less, and as a result, in the long term, they screw up their health. And they never realize they have a loss of sleep. Okay? Yeah.
Does the amount of sleep has anything to do with your cognitive activity?
Absolutely.
So if you're more connected, you don't need to sleep.
No. The thing is, basically, if you sleep well, you may be better connected.
But if throughout the day also I am connected more, then I don't need.
Then you may have a less need for sleep.
Yeah, that's what.
But if you take, if you sleep lesser than the quantity you need, then you lose your connectivity.
It
Okay?
can change, the need can change based on what happens.
Absolutely.
Activity.
Absolutely. All depends on the chitta, right? So you see what happens is, it gets deviated. Each of these you can understand. Let's come back now. The chitta is the programmed being. There are 5 types of chitta that Patanjali explains in the first, of chitta vrittis, or the activations of the chitta, that Patanjali explains in the first chapter. And what he explains is that how you can overcome the activation of the chitta is by being a pure observer. How do you become a pure observer? By practicing it and being a person who is affected by nothing. And the words used is, abhyas is practice, vairagya is the state of being unaffected by anything, right? This is how you overcome. You become a pure observer. And what happens when you are in this stage? In the 17th sutra of the first chapter, he essentially says, vitarka vichara ananda asmita anugama samprajnata. In other words, what is vitarka? Questioning. Arguing, questioning. Okay? Vichara. What is vichara? Reflection. Thinking about it, right? And then ananda. What is ananda? You can call it bliss, but the idea of ananda is letting go. Nothing affecting you. Right? Happy, letting go. Ananda, asmita. What is asmita? In Sanskrit,
I can do.
if you can do, there is no asmita. That's not asmita. That is abhinivesha. I experience. That is what is asmita. I am. Asmi means I am. Asmita means I amness. Right? So when you have the me as the experiencer, okay, then what does it, anugama comes out of it, samprajnata. Prajna means intuitive intelligence. Samprajna means complete intuitive intelligence. Samprajnata is the knowledge of the complete knowledge of intuitive intelligence you get from that state. How? By questioning, by pondering, by letting go, and having the openness to receive. Asmita, right? So, when you have that, everything comes to you. So, in other words, what is the secret of yoga? Is learn to be a pure observer, have an open mind to receive. It'll all come to you. And for most of the world, being a pure observer is absolutely impossible, right? Because the mind is always getting thoughts. So, essentially, the starting point of yoga is giving a vacation for the mind. So, letting it go. So, and how do you do it? It's not easy. You have to do regular practice to do that. And in fact, many of you, when you're here sitting near this thing, there was this lady earlier in the yoga session today. She said that, how long did we do meditation? We did for 20 minutes. Oh, wow. At home, I feel that I've done for a very long time. Here I didn't even feel I did for a very long time. But at home she does for a very long time, and she wakes up and looks, it's only 10 minutes. Right? So what happens is, when the mind shuts off and you're gone, that is this thing where nothing affects you. Right? So that is the state how we calm ourselves. And when we are in that pure observer state, everything comes to you. Okay? So after this, of course, Patanjali immediately after making this, what you'll say is big statement that just by being a pure observer, everything comes to you. The next sutra, 18, 19, and 20, he makes a quick qualifications over there. Well, a lot of qualifications he makes. He basically essentially says, if you have any beliefs in your mind, they will be self-fulfilling. You will only experience your own beliefs, and don't think that's a final thing, right? So all of those kinds of things he says. And then after saying all of that, he basically goes on and say, Ishvara pranidhanatva, 21st sutra. He goes from nowhere, he pulls God out of his back, okay? So essentially says, just by surrender to God, everything can come. And then he goes on to describe who is God. So he actually gives a definition for God. Klesha karma vipaka aparamrishta purusha vishesha Ishvara. Ishvara is that person who is outside the cycle of karma. Okay? And so the fruitioning of karma, outside the cycle, fruitioning of karma. Right? So now I'm going to ask all of you a very troubling question. All of you have read the story of Krishna, right? When Krishna was hit by an arrow and died, at the end in his feet he gets an arrow and he dies, right? When he dies, the hunter is very upset and he tells him, oh, don't worry, this was the karma in the previous lifetime as Rama, he murdered or he killed Vali, right? In hiding or whatever, he says something like that. Huh? So was Krishna God? Okay, that's why I was going to ask you a very difficult question, I said. You see, because essentially Yoga Sutra says, Klesha karma vipaka aparamrishta purusha vishesha Ishvara. And then the next after that goes along is Sa Purvesham api Guruhu Kalena Anavicheda. Unbroken by time. Kalena Anavichedat means unbroken by time. Purvesham api Guru. That is, right from old times for everybody in the past, right from that time, Ishvara is the Guru of everyone. Unbroken by time. So what is the concept of Guru? Guru is God. Or I should say God is Guru. Not Guru is God. God is Guru of everyone at all times. And God is unaffected by the cycle of karma. Okay. Then, after that, the next thing that goes over there is Tasya Vachaka Pranava. I might have missed a stanza. That the vibration or sound of God is Pranava. What is the meaning of Pranava? Why?
Pranava mantra from the
Pranam is a bees mantra. Pranam is a bees mantra.
No, you see, the implication of what she said is correct. But the question I am asking is why? You see, what happens is, no, why? The thing is, you see, what happens is, you are right, the thing is, but the source is a very good answer. The thing is, you see, Pranava has, that word itself is pra connotes prakrishta. And anava means, you know what is an anu? Anu is the smallest particle. Anava means like a smallest particle, or anava. Okay? Pranava is the innermost core of the smallest particle. Okay? So in other words, if we could all listen to the spin of the electrons around the atoms, they should all be saying, oh. That's how they should be spinning.
Nucleus should be the same. Sun makes the
So, because it's the spin, right? They are continuously spinning, right? So the thing is basically, essentially, the Omkara that we say, Pranava, Tasya Vachaka Pranava, essentially means that it is through the innermost, by the way, any electromagnetic communication works because of the electron spin in each particle communicating into the next. So that's how they bounce and the waves travel, right? So essentially, Tasya Vachaka Pranava, that's how God communicates with everything in existence, as just said, and Omkara. And at another time, of course, we will have the discussion of when is the Omkara most useful and what is the meaning of it, of course. And there is essential agreement in the end. All the spiritual disciplines that have come from the subcontinent, all of them agree Om is the ultimate. It doesn't matter which one. Jainism, Buddhism, they are not really different. Or Sikhism, they are all not really different. They are all part of Sanatana Dharma. So but all of them, Om is there. It's pretty much common. The law of karma and all of these systems. Okay. So the second section of the first chapter describes the nature of God in existence, and there are two sutras that are added there in the end that essentially says, depending upon how much effort you put, your results will be equal to it. Okay? So that doesn't say too much. And after that, the last section of the first chapter goes on to say that people commonly are in a diseased state. When we say they are in a diseased state, it is either mental or it is physical. Okay? And laziness is also a disease, right? And a sense of unhappiness because you didn't achieve something, or you have something, you have fear of losing it. You have all of these are different kinds of disease states of the body or mind. Okay? So being in this diseased state of body and mind, it may be very difficult for you to be a pure observer, unaffected by anything. So, here Patanjali recommends how you should begin is, you should begin by one pointed focus. Okay? And that one pointed focus is really the concept of not letting your mind wander too much. Just keep to one thing. Right? And today, what is the disease people suffer from? Thanks to this wonderful instrument? Exactly, multitasking. And when they're multitasking, yoga goes away and sleep also goes away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the thing is basically, the starting process is one point focus. Let everything wait. Who cares? Right? Kya farak padta?
Yeah.
And so the thing is basically, when we deal with it in that this thing, but otherwise people are all in a sick mind. So let's practice the one point focus. So it can be anything you want. So Patanjali essentially says, whatever you can start with looking at a candle flame. You can watch your breath, or whatever captures your mind. That one point of focus, keep that. And if you keep that one point of focus, what will happen to you? Slowly you will get into a stage, you will get fully wrapped into it. When you get fully wrapped into something, he uses a very interesting word. He uses the word samapatti. You become like one with it, right? Now, I always give this example because when I used to commute to work, this used to happen to me sometimes. What happens is if you are driving to your workplace on a regular basis, 5 days a week, and one Saturday you had to wake up to go elsewhere for the same about the same time. So essentially you woke up, you're in this thing, normal this thing, and then you're out of the door, sit in your car, and next time after so many minutes you find you're outside your workplace. And essentially what happens is, unthinkingly, your entire engrossed, your whole programming has become one pointed focus, and that's what it has done. You're not even aware which traffic light you went through, where you did, but you reached okay. Right?
Muscle energy.
Huh?
Muscle memory.
You can call it whatever, you become like one into the process. The sense of you over there has completely disappears. You have gone over there. Right? And the thing is, you see, when people get completely engrossed into something, what can happen is, somebody can call you from behind, you may not even hear them. Yeah. And so, this kind of becoming one is called samapatti. He uses that word. And then he says, this samapatti, becoming one with this thing, if it is done on something subtle, when he says something subtle, like a point inside your body or something not gross outside, okay? If it is something subtle, that would lead to a state where you would go into what he calls a sabija samadhi. That sabija samadhi means, if you think of that bija or that seed, the seed that leads you into samadhi, if it is a focus on something that leads you over there, if you focus on that to lead you there, that becomes your bija or your stimulation for that samadhi. And when you reach a state where you are in that samadhi without the need for any seed, you are there all the time, that goes into the stage of nirbija samadhi. So this is the, but he also explains what happens in samadhi. In samadhi, ritambhara tatra prajna. In other words, in the state of samadhi, you are filled with the awareness of the cosmic flow. And there you have complete intuitive awareness. Right? Ritambhara tatra prajna. So, this is something he explains, that this is what happens in samadhi. Okay? So essentially, this is the first chapter, and you can imagine, in very simplistic words, what are the points made over here. If you can still your mind, if you are unaffected by nothing, if you practice with one point awareness, you'll eventually reach over that. But the key to it is daily practice. If you practice it, it will become part of you. It will stay with you. Right? That's the message. Now, what he goes on to the next two chapters, the body of the text to say is, he spoke about the chitta, the programmed entity, right? The entity. And the activation of the programmed entity is the problem, right? Chitta vritti. So, he goes on to explain what is this, what is the source of this activation? What is the source of this activation of our program system? This is all the karmas and vasanas and all of the things that have come into you, right? So he essentially says there are 5 and he calls them as kleshas. The word vasanas is really a Vedantic language, whereas in the Yoga Sutra it is called klesha or impurities, right? He says there are 5 types of impurities. And essentially the 5 types of impurities are the 2 aspects of the mind. What are the 2 aspects of the mind? Likes and dislikes. These are the 2 aspects of the mind. And then the second one is 2 aspects of your being or existence. Me as the experiencer and me as the doer. Asmita and abhinivesha. And the last one is lack of awareness of your true self, avidya. So these are the 5 impurities within us. And through the practice of yoga, when these impurities, when the true awareness comes in, you overcome these impurities. He essentially says, the lack of awareness of who you are is the biggest impediment. If you get over it, then in which case, you will become wise and you will be able to become a pure observer and you can get out of the cycle. Okay? And he basically says, once that awareness comes, the realization comes, immediately things will start clearing. Okay? And actually, we actually experienced this. It was not too long ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, one of our persons with whom I work in Houston. Now I'm going into some esoterics over here. Is essentially whatever are the kleshas or whatever the karma kleshas that are there. Some of us can look into it. We can see it. So you can work through it by being a pure observer. But the Yoga Sutra also says, when the awareness or viveka as it's called, that discriminating intelligence, when it comes in one shot it can remove it. Okay? We actually saw it happen. So it was very fascinating. I told him, you'll have to clear this. And then he was asking me questions. I was telling this, what is this? And I'm watching, it's beginning to clear. And suddenly that man is beginning to feel lighter. He says, yes, I can feel it now, this thing. And what happened is because that viveka arose at that point in time, that viveka arising is really something intuitively happening. It's not the words he's hearing from me, but something he's digesting from the words within, immediately. So Yoga Sutra says this. And then when this happens, all the things, purification occurs within, you get cleared off. And then of course, again, you become free, that is, you're liberated. You can be in this body till the body falls, you're liberated, you're affected by nothing. That this thing he tells you. Now, he lays out the principles of how this process happens for the simplicity of a practitioner in an 8-fold way. And this is what is called Ashtanga Yoga. And this comes in the second chapter of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And so in the Ashtanga Yoga, you have heard of the first one is Yama. You have heard of it, right? So the 8 of them are Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi. Asana, all of you have heard of at least. Pranayama, asana, pranayama you have heard of. And pratyahara is something which is a little less common, because the Hatha Yoga folks don't describe it very well, right? It's mostly on asana, pranayama, right? Pratyahara is prati-ahara.
Opposite of eating.
Yeah, if you think of ahara as eating, opposite of eating.
Ahara means we can see by eyes.
How about we say eating without eating? Eh? So pratyahara is the concept
Self-fed.
of
Self-fed.
of imbibing, working with vibrations. Okay? The key element of eating is you eat in order to provide the vibrations within for whatever is needed for your fulfillment. Imbibing the vibrations without eating is the concept of pratyahara. That's why pratyahara is connected with vibrations. Okay? And the next one after that is dharana. Dharana is the idea of one-pointed focus of the mind. And dhyana is when the mind, there is no mind, is the state of dhyana. The mind gets going beyond the the or intellect, where everything stops over there, the mind. And from there, when it leads to the intuitive cosmic awareness, that becomes a state of samadhi. Right? So the first two, the yama and niyama, are the ones that people often don't hear about too often in yoga sessions. They may even hear about samadhi, but yama and niyama people don't often hear. But these are some of the most important elements towards the practice of yoga. Okay? Yama means, actually it is very interesting. The word yama and niyama have something in common. Something in common. What? The word yama. Yam. The word yam is common for both of them. Eh? So the yes. The word niyama is nikrishta yama. That means nikrishta is what is subtle, right? And so the yama literally means, you can think of it as restraint. Okay? And of course what happens is in the Yoga Sutra, he describes yama as 5 aspects of yama. But that is just in order to explain to people of that time. Okay? So he will say not stealing, not saying lies, being truthful, right? So, these kinds of things, he will say not being acquisitive. Huh? Yeah, like that he puts it in there, okay? But that is not particularly, if you focus on that, you may not necessarily understand the holistic concept of yama. And one of them in there would look like some complete outlier. And that outlier is called brahmacharya. And because there were many stupid people of the past who actually, what happened was, they were looking like the 10 commandments. And thanks to the, coming of Buddhism in the Indian setting and the monastic system, as a result of that, celibacy was something that came along. Many people describe brahmacharya as celibacy. Okay? That's complete stupidity. Brahmacharya means Brahma me charna. That is, Brahm is all of existence. Moving in Brahm. So, moving in Brahm means curiosity to know about everything in existence. Taking the mind goes for a trip in everything it observes. Right? That is brahmacharya. And who does that? A student who seeks to learn. So a student is called brahmachari. Okay? So it has got nothing to do with celibacy or anything, but that is a misrepresentation that has happened through ages, thanks to various historical twists and turns. Okay? Now, So the niyama, so the yama is really, what is it, the sum substance of it? The sum substance of it is really being, even to say being restrained or whatever, it may not be the best thing. The sum substance implication is being true to your conscience. You as an aware being true to your conscience. Right? You shouldn't do anything that violates the conscience. Think of it. If you violate your conscience, there is some new program that is forming within you. You cannot be a pure observer. If you are true to your conscience, you have a greater chance of being a pure observer. Right? Now, let's come back to niyama, the other one that is not often discussed. The niyam concept is, all of you know from the common language, being regular in your habits is what niyama is all about, right? So here he will talk about being clean, cleanliness, shaucha, then santosha, and then yes, swadhyaya, tapas, swadhyaya, and ishvara pranidhana. These are the things that are put in there. Now all of this basically are being regular in your habits. However, most important element is that surrender to God, being regular in your habits. So what happens? Think of it, what happens from your regular practice perspective. If you're doing your 15 minutes, half an hour practice in the morning, where you're being a pure observer, and you say, no, I have to go to work early today, I'm not going to do it. Eh? What happens to you? You're too busy, you don't do it, it falls off. Right? So the concept of, and why is it? Because you surrender to God. I'm only an instrument of God, do whatever you want through this instrument, this body, right? When you have that attitude of surrender to God, then in which case, nothing in the world is going to bind you from something that is going to go towards God, right? So this is where it comes in. I'll share with you a very interesting story with one of our people in Houston that when I work with over there. There is this one person who was very stressed, young man, not too much old, perhaps in his early 30s or something like that, okay? So he has a family, a wife and children, and and very busy throughout. So when I saw he was so stressed, I was asking him, how we can get him to do any practice. Finally, so I asked him, what do you do when you wake up? What do you do next? Everything, all of these things. And I realized the only time in the day he was even willing to talk about, to quieten his mind, was when he was having his cup of tea in the morning. Okay, so I asked him, what do you do when you wake up? As soon as he wakes up, he brushes his teeth and then he goes for his cup of tea. And as he is going for the cup of tea, he's looking at his computer or his, mobile phone with, he's looking up emails, he's looking up all the news and all of these things. That's what he's doing. So I told him, how about we do the following? So from tomorrow on, you just enjoy your cup of tea and just watch your breath. Don't look at that, no more this thing. After you have had your cup of tea, he would normally go and have a shower, and then he will have his breakfast. And I told him, when you're eating breakfast after the shower, you can look at all of those things. He did that. After doing it for 1 month, his level of stress came down to the degree where you can see the importance of the niyama, how it has built him. Okay, he was quite a bit. I could see the change in him. Okay, so this business of yama niyama is when you keep the routine. All of it has got to do with working with our biorhythm. All of us have a biorhythm. Whatever practice you do, if it fits within the biorhythm, it will be, what will I call it? It will be very smooth. It will just be perfect fitting in. Now, it is also important to remember you can perhaps summarize the entire niyama is, any spiritual practice you do has to be consistent with your biorhythm and has to fit within, that's the end of the niyama. And the Ishvara Pranidhana is a critical component of it, is being able to let go. So, so after in the second chapter, after explaining these Ashtanga Yoga elements, 8 of them, he describes 5 of them there and 3 in the next chapter. The Dharana Dhyana Samadhi leads to various extraordinary experiences. You develop the ability to do various things, including like reading people's chitta, how they are feeling, and so these kinds of things. Okay. So anyway, so these abilities are something not uncommon. Okay, but people who have it will not talk about it, because you see, because it is, while it is there for some people, everybody doesn't have it, and so this can people be branded as weird or crazy. Mad, crazy, whatever. So people don't generally talk about it. Okay, and so the so this is what the third chapter discusses all this, and then the 2 points that Patanjali makes in the third chapter is one, that all of these abilities come only in order to fulfill that person's dharma or that person's duty. So whatever is there in that life for them to perform, that's why those siddhis come, those abilities come. Second thing he mentions is, if people get these abilities and they get put on a pedestal and it goes to their head, then everything is lost. Okay? And then so this is essentially the journey of self-realization, where from that inner awareness, stilling the chitta, you go through your inner awareness, connect into the cosmic experience, and you become fully realized. Fourth chapter is the context of who are you in the all of creation. This is very important, because the first question to ask is, everybody is telling you you're a product of your karmas, right? So you created your karmas, that's why you are this thing. Well, if I created the karmas, why in the first place was I so stupid to even take the first birth? Right? You should ask that question. And essentially, what the Yoga Sutra clearly explains is, the first birth you didn't create, God created for you. And after that, whatever are the senses that were given to you, you created your own karmas and you got into that cycle. So what was given to you by God is called the Mula Klesha, the initial impurity. And those who come from Christian tradition call it as the initial sin, right? You're all born sinners, right? The concept of that initial programmed entity. And it explains the concept of rebirth is essentially, it is an automatic process. Depending upon the bundle of programs you have, and depending upon the time and space you are, according to it, you just go in over there and you take the rebirth. And so in this context, it also explains that the purpose of your existence is to fulfill your dharma. When you are able to connect into the cosmic awareness and become fully, you are in the high state of samadhi, then you are there only to fulfill, you are in the state of samadhi that they call as dharma megha samadhi, to fulfill your dharma, your duty. So, and this leads to the final, state. And what is the final state? Actually, there are about, the last 4 sutras are the most extraordinary sutras of the Yoga Sutras. The last chapter only has 34 sutras. Tada sarva mala apetasya jnanasya anantyat jneyam alpam. Mala is all the impurities. Okay, I was looking for the word impurities, it was not coming. Okay, all the mala apetasya jnanasya anantyat jneyam alpam. So all your impurities are gone, and you have infinite knowledge. And what is to be known from that infinite knowledge is very little. Jneyam alpam. So this is essentially pointing out that we are all instruments of the divine flow. We can connect into the infinite, and the final thing to know is only we are born here to do our duty. There is nothing more to know about it. And then after that, so that is the 31st sutra of the 34th of the 4th chapter. And the last two sutras go into even a deeper level. It basically says what is the final state in which you can be. Okay? And this, if people read the Yoga Sutra correctly, they will understand that the Vedanta, the Brahma Sutras that were written by Vyasa, which was interpreted by Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya in different ways. Okay? It is their interpretations that came about, right? In reality, all of them are right. Okay? One is not wrong at all compared to the other. Essentially, in the Yoga Sutra, what it says, there are two states of final state when a person is liberated. Two states of liberation. So, one state of liberation is what he calls the state of Chanaprati Yogi. At every moment, you're connected and in yoga with God. That's the state of Chanaprati Yogi. Under this state, all your programs are all finished, right? So it is time to drop off, everything falls off. Even the body may go. But on the other hand, whatever is that link that is connected to God stays all the time. So in other words, this is the concept of everlasting heaven, the concept of always connected with God. Right? This is there in many religions, including the concept of what Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya said, that concept is there. And what is the other side of that liberation? Another possible liberation is Chitta Shakti Eva. Or if you are not always connected with God, and that always being connected with God has a very special name for it. It is called Jnana Bhakti. That bhakti comes from the understanding that God is the ultimate and we are all instruments of God, and you have the concept of bhakti or connectedness with God. That is what leads to that state. Whereas the other state is when you are not always connected with God, but there is no more program to come back into another body. Whatever is the component of you are, it all breaks up and becomes part of the energy of cosmic flow. After that, you are only a bunch of disconnected electrons and protons and neutrons. There is no cohesiveness. If you think in terms of it, there are 70 trillion cells that have come together to make you who you are. They're all kind of working together in a connected, intelligent way. When all of those cells dissipate and they go down basically to electrons, protons and neutron level, atomic level, they've all become part of the actually subatomic level, right? So that is, they have become electrons and protons and neutrons. They have all become energy of the cosmic flow, right? That is the description. And that the idea that nothing exists there, everything is gone, that is the same concept of the Advaita concept of the moksha, right? So both of these are there, but because both of these are there, there is a very interesting word used in the Yoga Sutra for the concept of moksha or liberation. The word is kaivalya. The meaning of kaivalya means what? You alone. The state of being of you alone. And what we call it is you're completely free. Right? So the word Kaivalya covers both aspects of the final state of liberation. Whereas on the other hand, from the Advaita Vedanta setup of Shankaracharya, when you use the word moksha, you are referring to the point of liberated where you have become without stress. Right? All becomes just base particles and gone in cosmic energy. Right? So this is the basic distinction. So the Yoga Sutra basically validates all the Vedantic philosophy, whether it is the monism of Advaita or the dualism or Vishishta dualism, whatever, all of it is validated in the Yoga Sutra. It provides the complete element. So that gives you an overview of Yoga Sutra being a philosophy of existence, okay? And how does the philosophy of existence and creation come through? Right here, you have the whole thing, and here you can see sutra by sutra how they fall in. Now, first chapter, 23rd to 28th sutra talks about God, okay? And sutra 4.4, that is the fourth chapter, the fourth sutra, talks about the nature of how creation comes through in the form of first creation. And from there, how it is, this creates another set of it, and you have all the sutras mapped over here, where how each sutra all hangs together. When you understand this chart, what you will understand is, the Yoga Sutra is essentially saying existence is a distributed computing system where we are all wirelessly connected with the cosmic flow and God, and we are all playing a cosmic dance or a cosmic drama whereby each one of us doing our job, we are fulfilling the purpose of existence, not for ourselves, for the greater glory of God or for the flow of the cosmic flow, God, whatever you think of, right? So with that, I will just stop over here because that essentially concludes the full overview and summary of the Yoga Sutras.